10 Labour members at the moment. We have 8 Conservatives, 3 Greens, 2 Lib Dems.
Part of the mayor's budget is to set how much he's going to charge. I didn't grow up in London myself, I actually.
Still need a lot more money. He's not putting that extra money, all of it, into the police.
Whenever anyone tells you London is getting safer, that is a lie.
Hello, Andrew. It's amazing to have you on my podcast. You're the first one from the London Assembly who agreed to be on the podcast, and it's amazing to have you on.
Thank you very much. I'm very lucky to be the first.
Now, when I first heard of London Assembly, I never heard it anywhere in the media. I never heard it anywhere announcing on YouTube. No, I never heard anybody talking about it. And when I went to the conference, I heard that you're one of the people working there, and there are actually quite a lot of people working with Mayor for the London well-being.
Yes.
In the London Assembly. So what are exactly the things London Assembly as a governmental body is responsible for?
Right. First of all, the London Assembly is 25 members elected at the same time as the Mayor in order to hold him to account and scrutinise his policies. And we also have a remit to raise issues of importance to Londoners. And that's basically what we do and have been doing for 25 years. So where we feel the Mayor is not doing what he should be, or we think stuff needs to be brought to his attention for him to pay attention to, that is our prime job. And we do that through we have committees on all the different subjects. So we have a policing committee, we have a committee about transport, planning. It's a very small remit the Mayor has on health, but we have a health committee. And so we have an economic development. And those committees take evidence from Londoners and so either recommend to the Mayor or create a report to recommend a course of action from the Mayor. And we also have the right once a month to have the Mayor in front of us by statute. He doesn't want to be there. He has to be there according to the
Q&A.
The Q&A, the Mayor's question time. And he then has to answer questions directly from the 25 Assembly members. It's a good way of holding him to account.
Interesting. So it's like a parliament inside of London.
It's kind of a parliament.
Parliament specific to London.
Kind of thing. But what you've got to bear in mind, and I think it's why we haven't had more public attention, is that apart from in a few specific circumstances, we don't stick our hand up to vote for something to happen. We might support a motion to the Mayor, for example, that something should happen, but we can't directly change it. The Mayor is the decision maker, and it is the London Assembly that holds the Mayor to account. So it's not quite a parliament because we're pretty much scrutiny only. And I'll say that those few times where we directly do have control, things like approving of the Mayor's strategies and his budget, and by a 2/3 majority, we could overturn those budgets. That, however, has never happened in 25 years. But we always have that power, and the Mayor knows that we have that power. And so it's sensible for whoever that person is to pay attention to what we're saying, knowing that we could completely kibosh his plans,
So is it mostly advisory powers you have to the Mayor, or like question the power to question his authority?
It's advisory powers, but we also have the right to summons the Mayor to come and give evidence on in particular instances. And we have the right to demand all the information that he has. We have the right to, for his deputy mayors who have a brief in different areas, so transport and policing and housing and the rest of it. We can summons them to come and give evidence to us if we've got particular concerns about the way in which his policy is being carried out.
Now, how is it? Has it got any clear interactions with politics inside of the parliament? Because I heard some of the people inside of the London Assembly are somehow as lords in the main parliament in Westminster.
Yeah.
How does that work?
We've had overlaps before. We've had situations where people have been elected as members of parliament while they've been assembly.
So then they have two jobs at the same time.
They for a period they have two jobs at the same time. We now have a member of the House of Lords on the Assembly, Sean Bailey.
Yeah.
But he gives his time to the Assembly more than he does to the Lords, because that's his responsibility. So there is some twin tracking, not a lot, but all parties of the two major parties, they've all at some periods had members of Parliament who are also Assembly members.
How does the dynamic work in terms of parties? So, like, for me, it's always interesting to explore the battle between the parties inside of the parliament and calculate, because I've spoken to so many MPs and they explain to me that elections, everything that is going on in the parliament, voting is basically calculation. You have to calculate how many people will support you, have to calculate how much of the population you have to target in order to win an election. So it's a very interesting game of numbers to me. And in the Assembly, I'm wondering, so you have 25, you said, right?
Yes.
25 Assembly members. And how many of those are now Labour? How many of those are Conservative? What's the distribution?
We have 10 Labour members at the moment. We have 8 Conservatives, 3 Greens, 2 Lib Dems, and 2 members, one member who is a member of the Reform group. But you can't have a group if there's only one of you. So he's a Reform Party member, but he's a member of the group.
So represents
one other independent member as well.
Interesting. Yeah. And hasn't been shaken by the 2024 election, or when were they?
Oh, it has been shaken because all of a sudden we have this is a political point. I am a politician, but we have a Labour group which previously attacked the government for absolutely everything, and now having to make excuses for that government when they do exactly the same thing as the previous government did. So
maybe a bit worse, but
I would say worse. I would definitely say worse. Things, they remained amazingly quiet on things like the winter fuel allowance granted that was previously given to pensioners, and they seem to be quite silent on that now. So the political dynamics are the same. Though it's important to emphasise that the Assembly, because it is a different kind of political body to Parliament, is that actually we try to seek consensus. We try to see what everybody agrees is in Londoners' best interests. And so we seek consensus. We don't always achieve it, but there's this big secret that everyone, or politics in general, they don't hide from the British public, but the British public is not very aware, is that actually we agree on 85-90% of the things. But it doesn't help our members or our supporters.
Things like
to go around agreeing with everyone, because that's not why our supporters who put us where we are, they don't want to hear that. So you will hear political debate taking place on the floor of the Assembly, and it can be quite divisive, but 85 to 90% of the time, we are actually agreeing. And when we produce reports from our committees, it tends to be one on consensus. So, for example, picking out that I proposed a motion to the Assembly last week, and it was for the mayor to effectively lobby to get rid of the leasehold tenancies, which many Londoners suffer from. and to introduce a pilot scheme for common hold. That was unanimously agreed by the Assembly. We've also put recommendations to the Mayor, for example, that he should set up drugs testing centres for those people who are using recreational drugs, and they think it's the best way to protect them is to ensure that there are testing centres in London. That has been a strong recommendation accepted by all the Assembly, and that is in that the Mayor has to act on. And so what we then do is, once we've done that, we then keep the pressure on until we get some kind of delivery from the Mayor.
And sometimes, although you mostly agree on the stuff that has to be done for London, specifically, sometimes those situations come up when you have to stand up for yourselves and stand up for the party, right? And how big is what is bigger for you as an assembly member? Is it the role of personality, what you would like to promote, or is it the role of the party, what party you would like to promote through your existence?
It's a strange compromise, because you're there because you're an individual. And
of course, but then you have to adhere to certain principles
you
of the party.
You managed to get there because you were a member of a party. If you'd have stood as an individual, the chances are you may not have got elected, probably wouldn't get elected. And we've had a not a strong record of independents being elected in the past.
Strong record is not small.
Like none. There has never been an independent elected.
Did you say there's one now?
That's only because that was a previous Labour member who is currently not part of the Labour Party, but I think he'll probably rejoin the party at some point. And so you're there because your party has backed you, but every single party is a coalition of people. Every single party is a compromise. You have left and right wings. You have what do they do it? The Liberal Democrats, orange Liberal Democrats, and sandal wearing Liberal Democrats. And in every party, they are compromises. But it's in your best interest as an individual, with the passions that you have and the drive that you have as an individual to achieve things. You know that it is better to achieve those things by occasionally compromising.
Yep.
And the parties are compromises. You look at the Labour group, the Labour Party, you see very left-wing Labour people being quite concerned about what Keir Starmer is doing. And you see,
are they though? I've never genuinely met or heard any Labour member of the Parliament or person.
They're
very concerned.
Discipline in the Labour Party is a lot more draconian.
Maybe they will like to express that in public, but they are.
What you need to do is take them down the pub and get them drunk, and then you'll find out what they really think about their party leaders. It's the technique I've used for years. I mean, that's not an excuse for my drink habit, but no, you really have to listen to what people are saying in a confidential environment, and you hear what the tensions are. I mean, they are. I didn't. There was a time when we had two Green members of the Assembly, and I didn't realise until after they were no longer Green members how much they didn't get on. And how much they disagreed on areas of policy. So they were very, very disciplined in that respect. But what you don't see when you hear the party presenting its case, whatever that case, what you don't see is the debates are taking place in their group meetings. And I always say, the bloodier the group meeting, the more united we are as a party.
So you have to create a certain amount of chaos in order
to. Yeah, absolutely. I like chaos theory. Chaos produces order in the end if you allow it to have its time. And so when you hear a group presenting a case, you realize there are a whole lot of arguments behind that resulted in you presenting that case. And each individual member can stop a party, for example, going too far. I've been quite known for that in the past. it is, it's grown-up politics to compromise. I know people don't like the term. They think it's giving in. They think compromise is giving in. It's not. It's about being adult and realizing other people have different perspectives in London. And it's that common path you're trying to get, which is in the interests of everyone. And that's, I think, what we do quite well on the Assembly, and yet still have robust debate about the important issues that face Londoners on things like the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone. There were many divisions on the mayor's ludicrous pursuit of rank controls, even though he knows that they never work anywhere. Things like policing will often take a different view from the other parties.
Now, how can you take a different view on policing?
Well, if we look at recently, we've seen a growth in mobile phone theft. Now, we've been pressurizing the mayor for a long time to set up a special unit to address that particular issue. And we would say that he is not very good at addressing crimes as they appear, in terms of high volume crimes as they appear. He lets them go on for far too long. Years ago, we had things like catalytic converters being stolen. It took a long time for them to set up a group to stamp on that. In terms of mobile phone theft, it's taken a long time, bearing in mind that we did a survey of Londoners, and Londoners for quite a while have been worried about the safety of their mobile phones. The kids on motorbikes will snatch them.
I hardly know any people whose phone hasn't been stolen.
Exactly.
I hardly know any.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Some people prefer to walk in streets with different phones rather than the ones that they have at home. And that's ridiculous. I didn't have that thing in the city where you live.
As though you have to constantly hide it. But this has been going on for ages. And it's what's curious, and you say, right, the effect of the London Assembly is that we developed a report that we submitted to the mayor only last week. And of course, we asked a lot of questions about mobile phone theft. We called the mayor in and questioned him at Assembly meetings and asked the police commissioner about it. Curiously enough, prior to the publication of this report, what happens? Oh, there's a crackdown on mobile phone theft, and they get together a group of officers to look like they're doing the job. So there are divisions in policing. Where there isn't a division is the confidence that we have in police in London. We've recently seen, for example, that the commissioner has been unable to sack for arcane legal reasons. He's been unable to sack police officers who he considers are a threat to women. He's been unable to sack them. Now, that is a ridiculous situation to be in.
What's the reason for that?
The law says that the minimum requirements that the police set for being trustworthy are not sufficient a reason to prevent somebody being a police officer. It's a stupid law. But it needs to be changed. It's been the same for decades. And so we now have the situation where police officers who the commissioner knows could be a threat to women, he has two choices. He can either let them carry on as police officers or put them on administrative leave at home. So carries on paying them, but doesn't actually let them do their job. And quite rightly, he's chosen administrative leave. But we're now paying for these people who are potential risks to women to stay at home.
Oh, you're paying for many people who are staying at home and not working at the moment.
Yeah.
So a lot of money from the budget is going in that direction. But let me ask you this. It's very interesting for me because in Ukraine, we don't really have such thing as in the politics, in the political landscape, we don't really have such things as you have to adhere to your party completely. Maybe we have that with Sluga Naroda, Zelensky party to a certain extent, but we haven't had that. Certainly, we haven't had that for a very long time. Ukrainian politics is very individualistic field,
Absolutely.
and it's rightly hard to understand for different people who come in London with different mentalities and different
Yeah.
political understandings, which are brought from their home countries. It's very hard for them to understand why are people so sticking to parties so much and not able to express any discontent with what the party is doing.
I think you are able to stick with express discontent in your party, but there's a general agreement. If you're in the party and then you say vote for someone else, you leave that party. You can't do that. You can't do that.
No, that's basic.
So it's a basic thing. I've been to Ukraine many times, and I won't say I understand it. I don't think Ukrainians understand their political system, to be honest, but I can't say that I understand it. But it does seem to be more personality-based than British politics, where we tend to be philosophy-based or belief-based political system. One of the things that I don't want to tell Ukrainians what to do, but one of the things that struck me, and I went over to do a training program with councillors from Kyiv. And one of the things that struck me was how much they felt they just had to do what they're told. And
Interesting.
I will say whoever the boss was. And I tried to say to them, look, when you're an elected member, when you become elected, you have a mandate. That means you have those people who you represent standing behind you, and you are speaking for them. You are not actually speaking for the party. So that's where our system sometimes is weak. You are speaking for the people who put you in power. And fair enough, in order to achieve the best for them, you have to compromise with the party system that we have. But ultimately, it is they who you represent, and they must never be second priority to your own party political allegiances. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of politicians in the UK, because of our party system, where they put their party first, and I don't think that's right.
No, I think that's a very interesting point. I can clearly see the distinction between Ukraine and other cultures in terms of their perception of politics. And this comparison between Ukraine and the UK is certainly very valid. But thank you so much for your time. It has been Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
It's incredibly nice to have you on my podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
And it's the first time I'm here in the City Hall where we're recording this. And City Hall is particularly notorious for the assembly members and the committees that are taking place here, particularly today, which is 25th, right? 25th of February we're recording
Yes.
this. 25th of February, because this might come out later.
Yeah.
Particularly today was questions to mayor, I believe.
Yes,
right?
we were doing our budget setting meeting, so we had the mayor. We had the final meeting of the mayor's budget. So him setting out how much money he's going to give to the police, to the fire service, to Transport for London, to the various development corporations. So after 2 or so months of consultation and one prior meeting where we looked at his draft budget, today was the final budget.
But you are a member of the assembly from the Conservative Party,
Yep.
Especially focusing on environment, fire, and transport issues. Tell me more about it. What have you done in the last year that people should really know about?
Yes, so I was first elected to the assembly last May at the elections. Elected at the same time as the mayor. And since I got elected to the assembly, one of the big issues I've picked up is actually around the A20 in my constituency of Bexley and Bromley. because what happened here is there was a speed restriction put on this dual carriageway by the Sidcup bypass, and actually it looks like TFL just have not implemented that correctly. There's all sorts of questions they've got to answer about how they did the implementation process. There's allegations that the signage was the wrong sign, and it looks like they followed the wrong chapter of the guidance. So it looks like they've really messed it up. And what that resulted in was thousands of drivers getting speeding fines because it was a temporary speed restriction. So I've been calling for an independent investigation into TFL to get to the bottom of what happened here, so that if drivers have been incorrectly fined and the TFL didn't properly follow the rules, obviously those drivers should get a refund and any points on their licence taken back.
Interesting. And with TFL, I think people living in London especially have a lot of questions about the cyber attack that was just recently there. And even though there might be not enough information right now to comment properly about it, would you like to tell something?
Yes, so because the cyber hack.
How secure is the information of the people who are, for example, making the cards, the oysters?
I couldn't comment on how secure the information is because I'm not quite sure about what Transport for London have done to make their systems more robust. What we do know is there was a hack. It was a very sophisticated hack, which is why it took so long to resolve. And over the last...
It was there for months.
Yes, exactly. I think we're coming on nearly 6 months of it, and there are still implications from it. Of course, people are still waiting for refunds, and that's really, as Assembly members, where our priority is making sure that people who had to pay extra for their travel because they couldn't renew Oyster cards, or they had to spend extra on their travel, making sure that they're properly remunerated and they get their money back, because it's not their fault this happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really our priority as Assembly members, is making sure people get their money back, and also making sure that the systems are sufficiently robust that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, because we know there are hostile states like Russia, like China, who are using cyber attacks as a new form of warfare, and that's why it's really important. That's why it's really important that all of our public bodies, like Transport for London, like the NHS, who have also had a cyber attack in recent years, we've got to have the most robust systems to protect people's data.
Oh, I know that very well. I'm a Ukrainian myself, and have been here for around 2 years only.
Yeah.
So yes, Russia is very much looking to utilize those strategies, especially with some of the situations happening on other parts of the world, in the US, when it's currently unclear what's really going on. It's an interesting situation when the president has been chosen, and not many people knew what they voted for, but not many people knew what actually is going to happen.
Yes, it's a very, very strange situation.
But let me ask you this on the TFL. I think many people raising questions on the cost of transportation nowadays, because I have a friend who prefers to walk from his home to the university, which is 1 hour and 30 minutes away, rather than to take a bus or take a train. And yes, looking at the prices of underground, prices of buses, it raises a lot of questions of whether it's appropriate to take a lot of that much money from citizens.
Yes, so transport fares, as you say, is a hot political topic here at City Hall. A part of the mayor's budget is to set how much he's going to charge. I didn't grow up in London myself. I was born on the other side of Kent in Sheerness, and then spent most of my teenage years living in Wellingborough in Northamptonshire following my parents' divorce. And because of that, we're outside the people in London do sometimes forget just how reliable our transport is. The fact that there's a bus every 10 minutes, that actually for the price we pay on Oyster cards, about £1.90.
It is great. It is great.
Yeah, it's a very competitive price. Whereas up in Northamptonshire, it's not the case. You get a bus and it's about £10 or something to get a ticket. And that's because of the infrequency of the service and things that they have. They can't run as frequent services as we can in London. So we are very fortunate with the transport system we've got in London, but that does mean we have to pay for it. we've seen that the mayor, Sadiq Khan, since he became mayor in 2016, he froze pay-as-you-go fares for a lot of his time as mayor. And what this has actually done is it's cost TFL millions in revenue that they're just not getting through fare raising, and that's why we've seen a number of projects have to be delayed because TFL don't have the funding, and we're seeing all the buses still in service. We're seeing the Bakerloo line, the stock there is really aging stock on our trains. The Central line is practically falling apart, and this is because we don't have the money to invest in it. And I think that's the thing for people is when they see fare rises and things, they have to then see the investment that follows. And quite frankly, people haven't been seeing that because the mayor has been making the decision to take money out of the system. And the sad part is that actually a lot of Londoners didn't even benefit from the fare freeze because it only really affected pay-as-you-go and TFL only fares, which while that was great for buses, actually in terms of commuter patterns, it didn't affect season tickets, particularly people I represent in South East London. They're paying pay-as-you-go for things like or topping up their Oyster cards, where some of the money goes to go via Thameslink and South Eastern because those are the rail services are there. And they didn't get the fares freeze because that's government because they're linked to the national fare raises. So actually, it's taking a lot of money. So a lot of Londoners are suffering because Central line is falling apart, Piccadilly line needs new stop, the older buses, all of this, but at the same time, they didn't benefit from the fares freeze because it didn't actually reflect how they travel.
So since we're here in the City Hall, and I had an interview with Andrew Boff
Yes.
previously, and I have asked him this question of how does this generally function, and what's the dynamic between the parties, how do we make decisions, and he pretty much explained to me that the main decision maker, of course, remains the mayor. And what the assembly does is it can occasionally question his decisions, and maybe if he thinks the assembly is competent to advise him, then he will change them. So if I'm understanding that correctly, the main decision making still remains with mayor. So all the TFL issues or all the budgeting issues are still the main. If there are any complaints, they will have to be directed to mayor and not the assembly. What assembly makes sure is it just monitors whether everything functions properly, and if it sees any inconsistencies, it raises a question. Is that correct?
So we're not an executive body. The executive power, as you know, the decision-making power sits with the mayor, and he has a team of deputies who support him. So he has a deputy mayor for policing, a deputy mayor for the fire service, a deputy mayor for transport to each take a portfolio, in a similar way to the cabinet style of government, where we have the prime minister and then the cabinet. But unlike Parliament, I said we're not an executive body in ourselves. We are purely a scrutiny body. So as you say, it's the questioning, it's the drilling down into the detail. We conduct investigations and we make recommendations into how things can be improved. So as we mentioned earlier, I sit on the Transport Committee, and one of the investigations we've done this year is into the accessibility of the transport network. So we've looked at, we spoke to key stakeholders, and we've looked at just how accessible is our transport network, and crucially, how can we make it more accessible. So that's how we kind of use our power. It's a soft power that's there to make recommendations. The budget, which you kindly sat through this afternoon, that is a decision we take. The mayor does have to get his budget approved by the assembly.
Oh, interesting.
But it requires a 2/3 of the assembly to block it. So we have this bizarre system. So I mentioned that we had 2 budget meetings. We had one to look at the draft budget and one today that was the final budget. With the first budget, there was this bizarre moment whereby actually the budget had more votes against it than for it, the draft budget, because the Conservative group, the Liberal group, the Reform member and the Greens voted against the draft budget, and we outnumbered Labour because of the electoral system. But because we didn't have a 2/3 majority, it still passed. which as I said was a very bizarre system because I'm also a councillor in Bromley, which is where the Conservatives are in control of that council. We have the most seats on the council, and everything at council is just a simple majority, so we can pass everything because councils are elected on first past the post. Whereas the Assembly has a combination. I'm elected on first past the post as a constituency member, but out of the 25 members of the Assembly, only 12 are constituency members. So I represent Bexley and Bromley. There's a Grange in Lewisham, Lambeth and Southwark, Croydon and Sutton, and so forth. Each of about 2 or 3 boroughs each. But then the rest of the Assembly is elected on a top-up list. So when you go to vote in the Assembly election, you get 3 ballot papers: one for the Mayor of London, one for your constituency Assembly member, and one for the London-wide members. And that's done on a form of proportional representation with a calculation that I'm not sure anyone truly understands. But basically, you get penalised for how many seats you hold. So Labour hold the majority of the constituency seats at the moment. As a result, they only have 1 top-up member. They've only got 1 member from the list. Whereas we have 3 constituency members and 5 members of the top-up list. The Liberal Democrats have 1 constituency member and 1 top-up member. The Greens and Reform are entirely top-up members elected from this proportional. So because of that, no party actually has a majority in the Assembly, which is one of the reasons why it operates as a scrutiny body. And that's why they've got the 2/3 majority rule, because otherwise the budget would almost be nearly impossible to pass without having to go to backroom deals to try and get it through with votes from Liberal Democrat or Green members.
And it makes sense. One of the other issues that you're focusing on is the environment. And when you told me before the recording, that you're focusing on the environment, I was actually quite interested, because that's not a famous issue for Conservatives to focus on nowadays. Especially if we look into some other countries, they're very much opposing the measures that their government can take on the environment. So as far as I know, as long as I've been able to monitor the situation, to analyze, in the UK, I think people are pretty much in solidarity that we have to do something about it. But the measures, the magnitude of the measures that we have to take varies from party to party, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true, and that's true of all issues. A lot of us share the same. I often say about politics is that if we were in a car, we all agree on the final destination, which is a better society, a better country for everyone to live in. Where we disagree is on the route we have to take to that. So I'm a Conservative. I believe that the best way to achieve that is through a smaller government, the state doing less, supporting people to achieve their aspirations, not having barriers put in their way. That's really, someone from a working class background, that's what attracted me to the Conservatives, is that to succeed in life, the Conservatives ultimately do not want a big government getting in the way. And people on the left agree we need more government and more regulation, and that it's just a difference of opinion, and so forth. So, but when it comes to the environment, I think the environment is a very conservative. We are Conservatives. We want to conserve, whether that's our green belt, protecting our.
That's an interesting take. I've never heard before.
On things like the green belt, completely. We want to protect our green belt, the mental health benefits, the physical benefits. In April, I'm actually walking the green belt, all 150, walking the London Loop, all 150 miles of it in the space of a week. Because that's how strongly.
You mean walking?
Yeah, I'm doing it on foot to raise money for charity. So, but on that point, it's this debate around net zero and how quickly we reach it. And it's not that anyone really there are still some that deny that man-made climate change is the thing. I'm definitely not one of those people. But with the net zero debate, the debate really focuses around the balancing and the offsetting. So it's not about denying. It's not about denying there's a climate emergency happening. It's about debating how quickly we have to deal with it, and about making sure that our international partners come on that journey with us. And we saw that with Rishi Sunak last year when he kept the 2050 net zero target, but he adjusted some of the deadlines in that, because we have got to protect people's jobs. We've got to take people on this journey with us. People have to buy in and invest, and there's like things like the ultra low emission zone expansion that Sadiq Khan imposed. There was no evidence that that's cleaned air, improved air quality, because out in outer London it is more rural. There's more trees that absorb the CO2 and so forth. It was clearly about money making, and that's why people were very sceptical about that. But nobody denied the fact we want cleaner air in London, but it was a disagreement with how best to get there. And you imagine that the net zero debate. What we can't have is whole industries collapsing. In fact, there are still parts of this country that haven't recovered from when coal mines and things were closed. So that's really, we've got to have this transition. There's got to be the support of the jobs that get created after it. We've got to make sure there's no unintended consequences, because when we started talking about getting rid of single-use plastics, which a lot of us agree with, there were companies that existed that reused that plastic, that recycled it, and or found other uses for it if they couldn't melt it down. And therefore, when we started phasing out single-use plastics, we actually harmed what those businesses do. So I think there's getting that balance right. People do need time to adjust. What we are seeing though is a lot of taxpayer, with Ed Miliband as Secretary of State, we are seeing a lot of money pumped in to trying to achieve net zero, but we're not actually being told why that's going to help achieve it or so forth. And I think some people do feel like we could make ourselves the greenest country in the world, and we are actually one of the greenest. David Cameron, as Conservative leader, spoke about leading the greenest government in this country's history, and he largely did achieve a lot of that. But you've got to bring people on that journey with you, and people also have to see our international partners pulling our weight, because otherwise some people will look at it and think, why am I drinking through a paper straw when celebrities are running around in private jets? And these are the same celebrities who lecture us on the environment. So I do think there's got to be leadership on that side as well.
No, I do think there has to be a combined effort from all sectors of the society, and it's obviously quite hard to achieve. But when I spoke to a person that's actually very enthusiastic about transition, extremely enthusiastic, more enthusiastic than anybody I've ever met, he's an MP as well, Perrin Moon, in the parliament right now, newly elected MP. He has told me that the UK actually doesn't contribute to much of the world global emissions. So even if UK becomes the cleanest country in the world, it wouldn't make a global difference. It would only be like an example for others to follow. And of course, in order to achieve something in terms of net zero and pretty much anything, it has to be a combined effort, not only from the country and all sectors of the society within the UK, but also from countries like China, like India, and we have to bring those with us.
Yes, we do 100%. As I said, there's got to be global. But the joy of us, we are one of the largest economies in the world. We may be a small country geographically, but we're a big global player. We're a big global player. We're a big economy, and therefore, if we transition to net zero and show other economies around the world that a big economy can move to net zero, by leading by example, that soft power will get other countries to come on the journey with us. Different countries are going to move at different paces, but it is important, particularly the big polluters like China and so forth, they have got to up their game. America has to do much more and so forth, but I don't think the UK should shy away from being a global leader in this and really leading by example.
So one of the last questions perhaps is more like a creative one. What are the probably discussions or something that the assembly has done already and you have participated in it that you feel particularly proud of?
Yes, so only last month we passed a motion calling for changes to the way that housing targets are done. I mentioned earlier my passion for protecting the green belt because the green belt's called the lungs of London because of its huge environmental benefits, but also open spaces are not just good for physical health. I talk as someone myself trying to shift a second chin, but it's also mental health, the benefits of that. So our green spaces and our green belt are so incredibly important to London, but the housing targets coming down from the government really do put our green belt at risk. Take Bromley, where I'm a councillor. The housing targets for Bromley are going from 774 homes a year to 3,001 homes a year, and that's over a 5-year period or so. Even if we built on every inch of our green belt, and we've got more of it than any other London borough, even if we built on every inch of our green belt, we cannot meet that housing target. There is not the skills in this country at the moment needed to deliver that many homes. It isn't the resources, it's not the material to deliver that many homes. It's a very ill thought out target, and the thing with the green belt is you can only lose it once. Once it's gone, there's no getting it back. So in order to try and address this, we had a discussion at the Assembly last month about housing targets, because those 3,001 homes a year, that is just a number of units. That can be a studio flat, or that can be a 5-bedroom home. There's nothing to distinguish it. In outer London, it's more people move out to the suburbs for more family, for more family living, and inner London is more young professional, more young professional people starting out in their careers and whatnot. So they need more 1 and 2 bedroom homes, whereas outer London needs more family homes. So building loads of 1 and 2 bedroom flats out in outer London makes no sense. So one of the things we did in this motion was not only reinforce a commitment that no blade of the green belt should be touched until all the brownfield sites are gone, but also saying instead of having this blanket X amount of units, you should have localized targets for the type of housing, that you're impacting. Because as I said, we're not an executive body, we're a scrutiny body. This just means it goes as a recommendation to the mayor that we have called on him to lobby the government to make this change. It does not bind their hands or anything to make them deliver the change, and that's part of the frustrating thing about the Assembly, is we're not decision makers. And so when you get the wing of passing these motions, like I mentioned the A20 investigation I called for earlier, when you make these when you move these motions, amend the policy, there's no guarantee it will then actually be acted upon, and that is frustrating. But again, we can at least lead and shape the conversation, and that's what we're trying to do around the green belt, of saying it's really not, it can't be. We do need more homes. We especially need more family homes. So we can't be in this situation whereby we're saying no to new homes. So it's about how we shape that conversation to make sure that we get the homes we need, but that they are appropriate for the area.
Well, I wish we had time to continue for much longer, but unfortunately it seems like we're running out of time. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the discussion. Hello, Alex and Susan. It's amazing to have you on my podcast today. And I know you've been working in City Hall in London for a while, and it's your first term. So what is it like to work in this building? Is it somehow happening to be boring, or it's repetitive, or it's actually quite exciting?
It's very frustrating because we can see lots of things that are going wrong in London. Alex concentrates on the economy, and clearly now we've got a Labour government, things will be worse, and I'm sure he'll tell you about that. And I really concentrate on policing. I'm chairman of the policing committee at the moment. We're looking into particularly violence against women and girls, which is at epidemic levels here. And I've done a big thing on public policing. When you look at all of the demonstrations that have been going on, just how the police deal with that. So we're looking at various different things that are going on in London and going wrong in London. The frustrating bit is when we get to ask the mayor questions, because he never answers questions properly, and both of us today have asked questions. I've asked questions, funnily enough, on the economy and on the way he spends his money, or rather taxpayers' money. And I'll let Alex say what he's asked questions on, but he just never answers questions properly. So we spend a lot of time finding things that need to be addressed, because that's our job. We're a scrutiny body. So we find lots of things that need to be addressed. We ask him about them, and we're very lucky if we ever get a proper answer. So from that point of view, it's very frustrating. From another point of view, every day is like a school day. We learn things all the time about this wonderful city. So I'm very happy to be working here. I just find it frustrating at times.
Do you think the fact that the mayor often does not answer questions directly is correlated with his unwillingness to make probably a mistake, or to let everybody know that things are going wrong, or with the fact that he actually does not have to? When I interviewed Thomas before, he said that your powers are basically a bit limited in terms of what you can help mayor to do, what you can persuade him to do. So what are your powers, and how can you force a mayor to make changes?
So the London Assembly doesn't have any statutory powers to force the mayor to make changes, except for two things. So number one, if 2/3 of the Assembly votes to make changes to his budget, they can do that. I don't think it's ever happened in history, mainly because the left-wing parties tend to generally support the budget we oppose, because it's generally filled with wasteful spending, which Susan has focused on today, and tax rises which are destroying Londoners and London businesses and various other things. And the other thing, summonsing power. Now I think Susan actually utilised her summonsing power as the chairwoman of Police and Crime Committee to summons the mayor to come and answer for the disastrous job that he's done with policing in our city, which was exposed in one of the reviews. I think Sir Thomas Windsor's review. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So, you know, those are the two statutory things. But ultimately, it's up to Londoners. You know, I'm careful with my words, but I get extremely frustrated with some people that complain about the state of London, but yet voted again for this awful mayor. And secondly, those that don't vote. So if you really want to get rid of this appalling mayor, well, you need to vote him out next time.
And budget is actually one of the things that when I've done an interview with Andrew, Boff, and when I've done an interview with Thomas, it's one of the things that we haven't talked much about. So please, whoever wants to expand on that, tell us more on what are things in budget that you consider are wasteful.
Okay, well, he's got a £21 billion budget, and that shocks people when we actually say it. I don't think people can believe it. People have actually said to me, do you mean 21 million? No, it is £21 billion. And if we take my passion, which is policing, the Metropolitan Police need more money, and he's just not finding it for them. I think council tax has gone up something like 79%, 75% since he came into power. And last year, or this budget going through, he said he hated putting council tax up, or his part of it, but he had to because the police need more money. Well, the police still need a lot more money. He's not putting that extra money, all of it, into the police. And we've got to recognise that with the government's hike in national insurance for employers, as an example, the Metropolitan Police will have to find an extra £60 million to cover that. So when he says, oh, the government's giving extra money, he fails to mention that £60 million of that is actually what they've caused because they've put the national insurance up on an employer. So there's so many different avenues. He wastes money. Today, I use the example. We've found out through Taxpayers Alliance that TFL, Transport for London, have spent in the last year £7.9 million on what they call facility time. So for people to go and work on union business. Well, when we're all crying out for money in various different areas, why on earth would you allow £7.9 million to be used on what we call facility time for the unions? We looked at equality, the EDI payments for staff. I think it was something like 450 million, 450,000 for that per year. That is something that could be cut down drastically. There's just so many areas he could cut down his spending and spend it on things that Londoners want. And if you look at any opinion poll, Londoners want to feel safer, and they feel less and less safe. And we've got to look at it. If you look at tourism, people love coming here, but people are becoming more and more concerned about their safety. So spending on the Metropolitan Police and spending on keeping us safe has got to be the way forward.
And I assume policing would be one of the ways that all of those redistributed money potentially could go to. And what are other areas that you potentially could redistribute money to?
So we had our budget amendment, which was voted down by the left-wing parties, so Labour, the Greens and Liberal Democrats. You know, there's an obscene number of, let's say, people in TFL that are earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. You know, why? We should be investing that money in TFL services and frontline workers that are actually running the service rather than fat cats and bureaucrats. You know, I'm sure there are some people doing a good job at the top of that organisation, but if you ask me, that money could be better invested in making sure Londoners get from point A to point B. So, you know, what happens in large organisations like this is, you know, you go along and people don't monitor the different pots and then they explode out of all control. So there are various different things that we can look at. Another one is London and Partners, which the last time I checked was getting tens of millions. And all they do is push the mayor's propaganda about how wonderful he is, how much he's doing for London's economy. And it's all a lie. It's all a lie.
Both of you have mentioned that you're quite unhappy with what Mayor currently is doing, but as far as I know, he's been in power for quite a long time, and people keep re-electing him from one time to another. And I'm wondering, the first question that comes to my head is, why do people still re-elect him? Do you think people do not understand what he stands for, or they genuinely want to vote for him?
If I may just, because Susan was our mayoral candidate, she'll have her own views, but my view is, if you look at the times he got elected, so 2016, quite frankly, I don't think our mayoral campaign was what it should have been. It wasn't a bad one. We had a good candidate in Zach Goldsmith, but we could have been better in getting across what a Labour mayor meant for London. The second election came off of the back of Brexit, and London was a Remain city. And, you know, a lot of Conservatives that would normally have voted Conservative voted for Sadiq Khan because of the things he was saying on the EU. In Susan's election, the Conservative Party was in a dire state in the polls. We were polling at 18% in London. And one of the things that makes me angry is that people forget Susan performed 12 points better and hundreds of thousands of votes better than the party did at the general election. So if it hadn't been for Susan Hall, we would have had a much worse mayoral result. Now, so of course, Susan can't say those things about herself, but I don't know what your views are.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would just say I don't think lots of people understand what they're voting for. I think there's an apathy there. People, it's like with the locals, sometimes they don't bother. People don't always get the different levels of government and governance, which is a shame. Very often, if, say, the Conservatives are in charge of the government, they assume they're in charge of the local councils, and of course it's not that way. So whether people should be taught more in schools as to how it all works, I would approve of that. Why they keep voting for Sadiq Khan is clearly beyond me, because we had such a good, Alex was with me through the whole year, and we were knocking on doors. We were out 7 days a week. We couldn't have worked harder for the mayoralty. And in outer London, people were so fed up with him because of the ULEZ and various other things. So we did the best we could. I only hope people's eyes are opened. Although whether Sadiq Khan will stand again, I think is somewhat doubtful. because people are beginning to realise that, you know, you can only blame the previous mayor for so long, and he's still doing that. He's always said, give me a Labour government and, you know, life will be wonderful. Well, it's clearly proving that is not the case at all. So all the things that he said, if only I had a Labour government, you know, life would be wonderful. It's being proven that life is far worse because this government is so incapable of running a country. And I think, therefore, he will get a cushy job somewhere doing something with the environment and a hefty salary with it. I think that's what he's aiming for now.
Susan, one more question for you. You've mentioned the point on violence against women and girls.
Yeah.
And at least in my time in European Council of Europe, and in any European organization, I think now it's a big question on how to solve this, and a lot of measures are taken again to prevent these things from happening. And some people are even arguing that measures that are taken right now might be a little bit excessive. But why do you think the violence against women and girls is rising over time in London?
There's so many answers to that. Down to basics, we need more police officers. If you look at the caseloads for people that are trying to deal with it, they're far too big. So from the policing point of view, that's an issue. There's no doubt that social media is playing its part. I think also with more and more people coming from different countries who regard women as second-class citizens, that can't be helping the situation. So it's no one thing. There's lots of different reasons, I think. But if we don't try and deal with it, it's really getting to epidemic levels. When I've had people in front of my committee, they are wringing their hands saying it has never been as bad. It's getting worse very, very quickly. And they don't know how to cope with all the victims of the violence because there's so many that we haven't got enough resource in place, we haven't got enough people that can help. It is getting very, very bad. And for those of us with daughters, wives and a daughter, I mean, it's very worrying for all of us on different levels.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I mean, everything that Susan says is completely right. And it's evidenced. It's not just Conservatives saying it.
No.
You know, it's what sexual offences have gone up by 7.7% over the last year. Rapes have gone up by 2.3%. You know, so whenever anyone tells you London is getting safer, that is a lie. It's a lie.
So perhaps the last question to both of you: what is your plan as Conservatives moving forward to maybe oppose the mayor, or maybe what are the other options for Londoners to choose another mayor, and how is that better?
Well, we wait to see who puts their name forward for our next candidate, and just as we did for last year, we will work our butt off to try and get a Conservative in place, because I think Conservatives understand what's got to happen. This mayor absolutely doesn't.
Yeah, I think Susan's absolutely right, and I think the party needs to throw their complete support behind the Conservative Party, behind whoever the candidate is. And I would say to Londoners and to anyone watching, the worst day of Boris Johnson's mayoralty was far better than the best day of Sadiq Khan's mayoralty. Almost anyone would be better in the job than this man, and whoever his Labour successor is, if he doesn't indeed run again. This is the thing. People can vote however they want at various different elections, but in terms of London, it's never been better than when we've had a Conservative mayor.
Well, thank you so much for both of your time for the interview, and it has been a pleasure to interview you.
It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure to be interviewed. Thank you very much.